Yo, what up guys, I'm Sammy and welcome back to the Soul Drop, and this is my performance review of the Anta Shockwave 7. Yeah, I was very excited to get these shoes in, and from my first impressions, these felt really freaking good. But of course, I played in it, and my opinions have changed just a tiny bit, so we'll have to go over all of that in this video. If you do want to cop, I'll try to leave in the free link in the description box. It is available over at Famuji. It retails for $100, right? Of course, you're going to be probably going to need a pay for shipping, which is going to add a little bit to that, but $100 is a very good price, right? So again, and the free link will be in the description box, and as always, thank you guys so much for all the support. But let's get it started right off with the traction. So as far as the traction pattern goes, we have a very aggressive herringbone traction pattern, and also the grooves are extremely freaking thick, you know what I mean? So as far as the durability goes, it feels like it'll be very good. You know, the rubber is hard, the grooves are thick and also deep, so you should be fine on an outdoor court, right? But how is the traction on an indoor court? So first of all, I didn't really need to break it in. It was good right out the box. And when I was playing on a really clean court, the bite was really freaking nice. I had a really nice bite, but also it was a little bit inconsistent. You know what I mean? So when I was playing on a really clean court, again, really good stops, but then for some reason, when I was doing like a really hard stop, it would slide just a tiny bit. So again, it wasn't terrible, and also it wasn't anything like dangerous or anything like that, and also it wasn't just like all the time, but I did notice it being just a tiny bit inconsistent even on a very clean court, which kind of sucks, right? And I noticed it a lot from doing crazy hard lateral movements, like just going sideways, you know what I mean, doing like crossovers, you know, doing quick lateral movements and stuff like that. But when I was going like forward, you know what I mean, doing like jump shots, going forward, and also doing like side step, doing like a 45-degree angle, I was fine. But doing hard lateral movements, I noticed it just a tiny bit being, you know, just a little inconsistent, right? So that kind of sucks. But again, for the most part, on a clean court, I had very good stops, right? But on a dusty court, it kind of is not it. It definitely picks up dust very quickly. It's pretty much a dust magnet. I feel like that's because the grooves are so thick, and I guess it's kind of clean right now, but maybe it's coming out a little bit on this pair. Probably not on camera, but yeah, you see all this dust that's stuck on the actual grooves, on these very wide grooves. It just gets stuck on there very easily. The one good thing, however, is that it's very easy to wipe off though, right? You just do a slight wipe and you're good to go. So yeah, that was fine, but it does pick up dust very quickly, and it is affected by dust a lot. So when I was playing on a like slightly dusty court, it was good. I was fine. I just needed to keep up with my wipes, and I was good to go. I had really good stops. Again, with the kind of inconsistent bites, right? But when I was playing on a very dusty court to like a moderately dusty court, it was kind of annoying. And also it wasn't terribly dangerous, right? I did notice myself like sliding kind of dangerously when I was doing really hard stops when I was playing on a really dusty court, but it wasn't super dangerous. But it just never had a really good bite, you know what I mean? And when I did wipe, I just had like a couple of good stops again, and then it would pick up dust very quickly. So yeah, if you don't like that, and also if you know you're playing on like a moderately dusty to a very dusty court, I probably wouldn't recommend this shoe. But again, if you're playing on a slightly dusty court to a really clean court, you should be fine, right? And also, this shoe is freaking squeaky, which I love, right? Of course, squeak has nothing to do with performance, but this shoe is super freaking loud for the squeak, and I really like that, right? So yeah, as far as the traction goes, I really enjoyed it when I was playing on a clean court, but when I was going to like the really dirty, dusty 24-hour fitness courts, it definitely was really annoying, and I didn't really like it, right? It just wasn't the best for dust performance. So there's a traction there. Moving on to the heel to toe transition, extremely freaking smooth, but it was a little bit painful, right? And that has to do with the cushion, I guess, right? But anyways, here in the heel, the cushion, the foam is so freaking soft, right? So when I was really sprinting down the court and doing very hard heel dominant strides, right? Doing kind of like a fast break, this foam is really soft. So then my heel would dig into the foam, and then my foot would hit the floor, and it would just hurt. You know what I mean? So I guess it has more to do with the cushion, right? But still, doing heel dominant strides, it's still really soft, but it was only when I was going really hard, you know, here in the heel and doing crazy hard heel strikes that, I noticed that, right? So just be careful with that. But again, I am average weight, so obviously if you're heavier, you're gonna notice that a little bit more, which kind of sucks. But anyways, there's that. And also coming here into the forefoot, we got a crazy curve shape. So just from the shape, it's really, really smooth. And for the most part, super soft here in the heel, besides when you're going really hard, right? Also here in the forefoot, it is able to flex a lot, right? So you do have a very flexible forefoot, and it does have a pretty kind of like a springy feel as well, which I do like, which is very different from, a lot of Nike shoes, very popular Nike shoes right now, like the Jaw 2, Sabrina 2, and also like the Tatum 3s, and also like the Luka 4s. But yeah, obviously we do have a carbon fiber midfoot chain plate that does improve the torsion support, but it's not super good for torsion support either. You know what I mean? It's not a super stiff feel here in the forefoot either. So yeah, it's overall just a very smooth feel with a kind of springy feel here in the forefoot, right? So there's a heel to toe transition. Moving on to the cushioning setup. So the cushioning setup is so comfortable, so soft, so freaking nice, right? So right when you put on the shoe, it has one of the softest underfoot cushions and step-in comforts that you can get right now. And I would say it's even softer than the Joker ones, right? Maybe around the same, but I would say it's a little bit softer because this shoe has a little bit more of a thickness to it as far as the foam goes, right? So for the court feel, it's not the best. It definitely feels a little bit higher up off the ground than the Joker one. I would say, like here in the forefoot, it has pretty good court feel, but here in the heel, it definitely does get pretty high up off the ground. There's a pretty high offset as well. So yeah, not the best for court feel, right? But you are getting a really comfortable step-in cover. So yeah, right when you put on the shoe, super duper comfortable. As far as the insole goes, the insole also is pretty dang nice. It has a nice kind of like compression to it. It's also quite thick. So that does improve the step-in cover, but also underneath that, we'd have a very soft, very like fine plastic mesh, like screen mesh material, you know what I mean? But it's not really super glued down or anything, super duper soft. And once you get going, it's super soft, and it also has a little bit of a bounce, but it's a very subtle bounce. It's also, I would say it's more like just soft, you know what I mean? So yeah, when I was, doing jump shots, step backs, and really playing, it was really soft. But again, when I was going really hard, right, and doing crazy heel strikes, heel dominant strides or whatever, my foot would definitely bottom out the cushion and I can feel the ground, So it definitely didn't have the best impact protection for hard impacts, but just moderate impacts, you know what I mean? Just, it's still kind of like playing, it was nice for me, you know what I mean? So obviously, again, I am average weight, so if you are heavier and you need a lot of impact protection and you're doing a lot of crazy landings and stuff like that, this shoe definitely isn't the best. And again, also for me, being average weight, it wasn't the best for me either, which kind of sucks, There's also a nice bit of heel compression as well, even though we do have all this cage, but this cage is actually pretty soft. It reminds me a lot of like the Liren 5V2 or like the WoW 10, where it's like the very thin plastic cage, you know what I mean? So yeah, that feels really nice and comfortable as well. But yeah, it does lack a lot in the hard impact category, impact protection, not the best, But again, if you're looking for something soft and comfortable, this shoe is really, really nice. So yeah, the cushion, there's definitely some pros and cons to it. And again, if you are a heavier dude that needs a lot of impact protection, this definitely is not the best option. So there is a cushioning setup there. Moving on to the upper. The upper is actually really nice. It's super duper thin. It definitely doesn't feel like it'll be durable though. It's a really thin material, but it does feel really nice on foot if you like to have a very minimal feel. It conforms to your foot extremely well. It's just kind of like textile mesh material. And also here at the tip of the toe, I actually really like how they added this fuse. It's this kind of like spiky pattern, and it does of course improve the durability, especially if you do toe drags. It also adds a little bit to the support as well. But yeah, overall it's just a really thin material here in the toe box. And also here in the midfoot, look at this. Very freaking thin, you know what I mean? So it's not the most supportive feeling shoe either, especially from the upper. The tongue actually has a little bit of padding to it, just a tiny bit on top here. But on the bottom of the tongue, we have this mesh material, which does improve the ventilation just a tiny bit. It's also a half woody construction tongue, giving you a better overall one-to-one fit. And also here in the ankle area, extremely minimal padding, like pretty much zero padding here on the sides. And also here, even on the back of the shoe, it's not super well padded. So yeah, it's just a really minimal feeling upper. Not the most durable, but very well ventilated, very thin, conforms to your foot very well, and adequate for support. Not the best for support, of course, but I would say it's on par with like the Sabrina 2s, you know? So there is the upper there. Moving on to the fit, so I went true to size, and this shoe fits me pretty dang well lengthwise, right? So lengthwise, I'm good to go going true to size. However, here in the toe box, it was pretty snug at first, but especially with this textile mesh material, right? When my foot's laying flat, it's kind of snug, but then it does have a little bit of like softness and forgiveness to it, so I can curl my toes up. But again, it is a very soft textile mesh, which isn't super glued down. So it did, get a little bit roomier once, now that it's broken in. So it is a little bit more on the roomier side of things, which I don't like, which kind of sucks, you know what I mean? So if you want a really snug fit, especially here in the toe box, not the best, right? Also width-wise, it's like kind of wide, it's like normal to slightly wide. So if you do have a wide foot, then you should be fine here going true to size. If you have a skinny foot or you want a super snug fit, this shoe definitely isn't the best option and definitely wasn't the best for me, right? So there is the fit there. And also, this shoe is very, very easy to put on because we do have a very high heel tab, which I do like, right? And now moving on to the support and lockdown. Again, this shoe isn't super supportive feeling, right? The overall shoe isn't super supportive, right? Like on the bottom of the shoe, not super supportive, very flexible. Also from the upper, not super supportive, but it is adequate for support. Or at least for me, it was. Again, I am average weight. If you are a bigger dude and you want a crazy amount of support, this shoe definitely is not the greatest pick. But if you need like, okay support like me, then you should be fine in this shoe, right? So as far as the lateral containment goes, I was good to go. Like we do have a good amount of the rubber coming up here in the forefoot, acting as a sidewall. However, the material isn't super supportive, and also it's a little bit wide, so my foot was moving inside of the shoe just a tiny bit. And also here in the midfoot, it was moving inside of the shoe just a tiny bit, right? So again, not terrible, but not the best, right? But as far as the lateral counter goes, my foot's not coming out of the footbed, but it's just moving inside of the shoe just a tiny bit, right? So yeah, here in the midfoot, I was covered. Here in the heel, I was covered as well, and there's an internal TP heel counter. So my foot's not coming out of the footbed, but again, it's moving inside of the shoe laterally just a tiny bit. So it just wasn't the best feeling for support, but it was adequate. It was okay. It was just kind of annoying, Also, as far as the lateral stability goes, I was good to go. Very, very wide base, you know what I mean? So I didn't have any issues with that. Also, I didn't really have any issues with the heel either, you know what I mean? Like I was a little bit worried about the heel because you are pretty high up off the ground, and also the foam is really soft here in the heel. So I thought it was gonna be a little laterally unstable. But like when I was doing heel dominant strides, it was a little, just a tiny bit, but then once I got here into the forefoot, because of this wide base, I felt stable, so it wasn't that big of a deal, right? And also, there was no heel slippage for me either. So, yeah, it just feels like a regular type of modern basketball shoe for guards that's very, very lightweight and very flexible, you know what I mean? So, not the best for support and lockdown, but also not terrible, right? So there's that. Moving on to the weight of the shoe. This shoe is pretty dang lightweight if I remember correctly. Well, at least it felt very, very lightweight on foot. Yeah, so 11.25 ounces. Extremely lightweight. Let's check the other shoe. 11 ounces, right? So yeah, the average weight of my shoes is around 12.5 ounces, but I feel like modern basketball shoes nowadays are extremely lightweight. So I feel like it goes to around like 12 ounces, you know what I mean? But anyways, 11.1 ounces average is very, very lightweight, and this shoe feels really lightweight, very minimal, and also pretty dang responsive when I was playing on a very, very clean court. However, again, the cushion isn't super responsive, you know what I mean? I wouldn't say it's like mushy, but it's borderline mushy for me. And I definitely feel like if you are a heavier dude, especially if you're looking for a responsive cushioning setup, like something a little bit stiffer, this definitely isn't going to be feeling like super responsive, especially for the cushioning setup. So, yeah, I wouldn't say it's the most responsive feeling shoe to me personally, but I felt kind of quick. I did appreciate how soft and comfortable the cushioning setup was, so you know what I mean? And I also do appreciate how lightweight this overall shoe is, and also how thin the upper is, But again, the feeling of the shoe when I'm actually playing isn't the most responsive though, So there is the weight there. Moving on to the aesthetics, I really like it. The shoe looks pretty dang nice. Anta is kind of killing it with their designs, especially with this colorway too, So tell us what you guys think of the aesthetics down in the comment section below. So wrapping things up, I'm a little bit disappointed, you know what I mean? I definitely thought I was going to like this shoe a lot more. It definitely isn't terrible, especially for the price though. Especially for the price, $100. Pretty dang nice, you know what I mean? The quality also feels pretty good for the price as well. It's just, The performance, there's a couple of things I don't like. You know what I mean? The cushion, first of all, there's two things. You know, I wish the court feel was a little bit better, and also I wish the impact protection was a little bit better because, yeah, just like, I definitely felt my foot touching the floor, you know? So that sucks. And also the traction was really nice. I thought it was gonna be phenomenal, but it was an issue for dust. It definitely is a dust magnet. And also with the fit, not the best for me. And also support, again, it was adequate, but just not the best, you know what I mean? So because of all those reasons, it's definitely not my favorite shoe. However, it's still a pretty okay performer, you know what I mean? And I definitely feel like if you are in the market for a really soft and very comfortable cushioning setup, then definitely this shoe is a great option, but that's about it. You know what I mean? I definitely feel like there are way better options out there, namely, you know, like the Joker 1, you know, Joker 1 GT, Sabrina 2, you know, the Lyran 5 V2, the AR 2, you know. But I guess for the price, you can't really beat the price. And it's a very comfortable shoe. So anyways, that about concludes my performance review of the Anta Shockwave 7. Again, if you guys do want to copy, try to leave in the free link in the description. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.